My name is Sarah Ashley, and I did my report over Jean-Paul Sartre. I'm going to go ahead and start out and talk about a few of the things that he did to begin with and a little bit about his life. He was a French philosopher. He did playwrights. He was a novelist. He was a political activist. He was also a biographer and a literary critic. He was a very important key figure regarding philosophy and especially existentialism. That was a really big part of his career. He was an important key figure in phenomenology as well as existentialism. As I said before, that was very, very important. He was a leading figure in the 20th century French philosophy and also Marxism. He also had influenced other disciplines such as sociology, critical theory, post-colonial theory, and literal studies. And that was just a few of them that I had named that I felt were the most important to me. I'm going to go ahead and talk about a little bit of his early life and a few of the things that he did and some of the troubles he went through and a little bit about his family. He was born in Paris in 1905. He was the only child of Jean-Baptiste Sartre and Anne-Marie Schweitzer, and I hope I'm pronouncing a few of these right. When he was 2, his father died of a fever while overseas, so it was just he and his mother living in Paris. After this took place, he and his mother moved back to her parents' house so she could get help with raising him, and she got this help from her father. His mother's father, introduced Sartre to mathematics and also classical literature, and introducing him to classical literature made him the person he was, and that was a very big influence on his life. Sartre's mother remarried when Sartre was 12 years old, and they all moved to La Rochelle. When they moved there, he was bullied very frequently throughout his life, and throughout his childhood, he was bullied all the time. And that was very important to me to learn that, because I didn't think as well-rounded and all as he seemed. I did not think that he would have been bullied. In the 1920s, he was bullied, as I said before, and he began liking philosophy after he read The Time and Free Will, and that was written by Henry Bergson, and that was a very important time for him as well. He attended private school called Cours Altimer, I believe it's called, and it was also a private school in Paris. During his studies, he earned certificates and degrees in philosophy, psychology, logic, ethics, and sociology. So all those things in here are different degrees in each category. He also received a certificate in physics. He also received his Diplôme d'études supérieures at the École Normale in Paris, France. This was an institute for very high thinkers and was also the alma mater for many other scholars during his time period, as it was for him. And it was at this institute that he also began his lifelong friendship with Raymond Aron. And as I was reading, I realized that they had their ups and their downs and had a few conflicts, but they did remain lifelong friends up until the day he died. He also received a great deal of influence from Alexandre Kohevis seminars, and this took place during school. In 1929, he met who would be another lifelong friend, Simone de Beauvoir, and they were also lovers, but they weren't really committed to one another. They basically just had their own type of relationship that they had going on, but she was also very, very important in his life. A couple of other important facts that I thought would be good for my presentation were the first time he took the test to be a college teacher, he failed to do so, which I thought that was very shocking, seeing as how smart he was and how many things and goals he accomplished throughout his life. When he took it a second time, he pretty much tied with Simone Beauvoir, and that was, as I told you before, the woman who was his companion and his lover. But in the end, he was awarded first and she was awarded second after all. And after he went through all of this, Sartre was drafted into the French army from 1929 to 1931. So pretty much closely after he got his certification to teach, he was drafted into the war. He served as a meteorologist for the period of time that he was involved. And after he was released from 1931 to 1945, Sartre taught at the Le Havre and also at the Lycée Condorcet. I believe that's how you say it. And also when he was in war, he was actually captured and was a prisoner, and wrote one of his most famous works during that time. Some of the influences that were thrust upon him became when he discovered Voyage au bout de la nuit, and some of this stuff is in French, so it's kind of hard to pronounce. And this was written by Louis Ferdinand Céline in 1933 through 1934. He also succeeded Raymond Aron, and this took place at the Institut Français des Allemands, and this was in Berlin. He studied Edmund Husserl's phenomenological philosophy, and he was a great influence upon him as well. The Neo-Hegelian revival also was a large influence upon him, and this really inspired him and an entire generation of French thinkers besides Sartre. And it influenced a lot of their works that they had written, and this took place throughout the 1930s. I'm going to go back to World War II and talk a little bit about that as well. Like I said before, in 1939, Sartre was drafted into the French War, and that's where he served as a meteorologist. He was actually captured by German troops and spent 9 months as a prisoner of war, like I had said before. And he wrote his first theatrical piece here called Bariana Fils du Tonnerre, and this was a drama about Christmas, and this was one of his most famous pieces because he was in prison while he wrote it. And during this period of confinement, he also read Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, and Sartre was released from the army in April of 1941 because of his poor health and eyesight, and he claimed that his eyesight continued to have gotten worse, and that's part of the reason why he believed it, but a few critics had kind of questioned that. And after this, he was able to recover his teaching position he once had when he had returned back. And after coming back to Paris in May of 1941, he participated in the funding of an underground group, and it was called Socialism and Liberty in English. In August, he also went to the French Riviera seeking guidance from André Gide and Andrew Malloux. And this was when he decided to write instead of being involved in active resistance. So this is the period of time when he really wanted to focus on his writings. A lot of this decision was made because of discouragement and disappointment. He had had a lot of discouragement and disappointment throughout his life, and he just kind of set everything aside and decided to really focus on himself and his writings at that point in time. And when all of this had took place and he decided to focus on his writings, this is when he wrote Being and Nothingness. And after August of 1944, he also wrote the work Anti-Semite and Jew. So I thought that was very interesting. In 1945, the war ended and Sartre moved to an apartment. And this was located on the Rue Bonaparte. He produced some of his greatest works at this apartment and this location. He quit teaching to devote most of his time to write, as I just previously said, and he lived here until 1962. He also developed the review Les Temps Modernes. He drew on his war experiences for his trilogy of novels, The Les Chemins de la Liberté, which means The Roads to Freedom in English, and that was written from 1945 until 1949. Later in life, he produced more works, and one of these was The Words, or Les Mots, and it was written about the first 10 years of his life and the things he had gone through. And in October of 1964, Sartre was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, which I felt was a very big accomplishment. And a couple of other fun facts that I found were very interesting was that he was arrested for civil disobedience in the summer of 1968, and that was in Paris, and he was arrested because he was actually striking. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about how he died and just the last little bit of his life. His health began to deteriorate, and when this started taking place, he pushed through to write a biography of Gustave Flaubert and Critique. And those two were actually not finished before he passed, but even though he was pretty much completely blind, he was still able to write those. He died on April 15th, 1980 from edema of the lung. He was arranged to be buried at Montparnasse Cemetery, and his funeral was on April 19th, 1980, and there were over 50,000 people that attended this. Some thoughts of his were, one of his primary thoughts was that humans are condemned to be free. He believed that concepts of authenticity and individuality have to be earned. They cannot be learned. They have to be earned, not to be learned. And he believed a great deal in the importance of life, and he showed this through his works, in my opinion. And I have a few of his works written on my paper. A few of them these were from from the early 1930s until he had passed, and some of them were Nausea, The Wall, and a lot of these are in English, so I went ahead and translated them. The Respectful Prostitute, The Victors, Dirty Hands, Troubled Sleep, The Condemned of Altona, and that was a few of the playwrights and things, and he had about 4 autobiographies, a few philosophical essays like Imagination, Being and Nothingness, Truth and Existence, and a few critical essays as well, Anti-Semite and Jew, Situations 1 through 10, Black Orpheus, The Henry Martin Affair. So he had a great many works, a great many. And I also put a few pictures on my laptop to show what he looked like. This was about when he was middle-aged, and that was pretty when he had gone almost completely blind when he was older. And that was him when he was younger and a little bit older. So, but that is all I have. Thank you.